Please rise for pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Reed Bible.
Here.
Reagan Franke.
Here.
Nick Frizzell.
Here.
Robert Howard.
Here.
Elizabeth Rice.
Sorry.
Paul Weigel.
Here. We have a quorum. We have minutes from June 10th. Any additions or corrections? We have a motion to approve.
Motion.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. New business. We have case 6172M, map amendment A2 to A1. David?
Good morning. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered this request as a map amendment from A2 to A1. It's approximately 10 acres in Green Garden Township. The Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, voted 7-0 to recommend approval to the Will County Board. Just of note, which is in the statement of facts, is that the Green Garden Township Planning Commission unanimously voted to approve the request. However, the board, with one trustee absent, voted no, not to support that recommendation. I know Board Member Rice had asked me just to give a little clarification on the township role in the process. Just generally on variance requests, the Township Highway Commissioner is notified, not the Township trustees or the board. On map amendments and special use permit requests, however, the Township Supervisor, and if they have a Planning Commission, is notified. If they have a Planning Commission and they choose to hear the case at the Township level, they can do so. They can make a recommendation to the board. You will notice typically is when you, like on this particular case, is they did do so. Many times if they don't provide correspondence, you won't see anything in the packet, but just in this case they did. And how does it affect the vote? With regard to the townships, with the 2010 census and the population of the county increasing to a certain surpassed a certain threshold, which then eliminated the township's effect and impact upon county board votes. So actually this is just a recommendation. It has no bearing upon county board vote.
Thank you. Questions by committee?
Well, I thought at this point in time, because we reached that threshold with the population, that it removed it from the townships at this time. Am I correct?
They're still notified, yes, but as far as the impact upon requiring a supermajority vote at the board, that's no longer the case, because we surpassed the population threshold that allowed the townships to have that impact.
Correct. So what we're doing though is we're just notifying them as a courtesy, correct?
Yes, that's correct, and yeah, exactly.
Are we putting any weight in their vote?
It's up to you. That's your prerogative.
Okay. I mean, what is staff doing though?
It's we look at the zoning ordinance and the criteria within the zoning ordinance, and
Okay.
that's our recommendations based upon that.
But staff is notifying the townships, or how does this work?
Yes, it's part of the application process.
Okay. And do you use that as a point of consideration?
Yeah, I would suggest is that it's probably taken into consideration with a variety of different factors, including the site visit, comments from other agencies and jurisdictions, and it's integrated into the criteria of the zoning ordinance, and that's truly the benchmark of the criteria that are identified in the zoning ordinance and the analysis that's done.
Mr. Howard, let me amplify on that. Say that if the, let's say it was a Township Planning and Zoning Commission who offered a recommendation on the subject. If that recommendation, they grounded their recommendation through commentary on the criteria of the county ordinance, that would be something that we would certainly be more prone to listen to and to take into consideration. If they offered their recommendation based on some assessment of criteria that was not embodied in the ordinance, or if they offered no explanation at all, just we're against it, then we'd be less likely to take it into consideration.
And in this particular case, the township offered comments that pertain to the type of construction of the building, taxes, and things of that nature, which in staff's professional opinion do not fall within the criteria of the zoning ordinance. So the staff recommendation in this particular case is for approval.
So to actually reiterate what you're saying is that if they ask for something that we recognize, we'll actually look at it and weight it upon that. If they ask for something, if they don't like greenhouses and they want a red house, we're not going to actually put weight to that. I mean, that's all I see is another layer of government here, and I'd like to streamline this process. And I don't think we should get into a process of putting a bunch of restrictions on it that really don't have any substance. You know, I mean, that's my concern with it. And if the state statute says what it says, you know, I think we should respect that at the same time. So.
I think the view has always been the history, the tradition, which history and tradition are made to be changed time. But the history and tradition has always been the addition to the legal requirements of the policy direction that we've always received this committee. In the past has been strong interest in positive relations with townships. Consequently, even with the legal change that we've done, and keeping with the notion that we've heard the board maintaining public relationships with affected local governments, that we continue to provide the registers. Again, just so that they know, I can assure you. And, you know, and this doesn't always open, as you know better than others. Township government is quite varied, and it changes from time to time depending on who the current set of officers are. But there are times when they really feel very strongly about they ought to at least be notified of what's going on in their neighborhood, so to speak, and have a desire to comment. But when they comment, as I said, the way we look at it is if it's pertinent to the criteria that we're asked to review, because it's in the ordinance, that has some bearing on our consideration. Once it's presented to you all, you can decide how you will as individual board members, to what extent, if any, you're going to take into consideration the recommendation of townships or anybody else.
Yeah, again, my concern is with the resident, okay? And in unincorporated areas, it falls under the county and the township, certain responsibilities. I just don't want to see a resident having to jump through additional hoops for anyone, you know, that are not really required. You know, I'm just saying, let's streamline it, let's keep it, you know, time is money. And basically this, you know, when we allow more input into it, you know, I mean, ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different suggestions, you know. Put it down to 26 people, you're going to get 26. Put it down to 7, you're going to get 7. So that's all I'm saying is my concern is that we don't burden anyone with any additional restrictions.
Well,
less is more in this case.
We certainly don't require the individual to attend any public hearing that a township wants to hold on the subject. We simply notify them that it's quite likely that this township will want to comment on your proposal, contact that township, and it's up to you. If you choose to go to the public hearing because you know that eventually that public body is going to be making a comment to the county, your choice, but you're not legally required to do so, and certainly not legally required to by us.
And a resident, the problem is they have a hearing. I don't want to see a resident have to hire an attorney to figure out what's what, because if somebody would say, there's a township hearing regarding my property, then automatically I'm going to assume that it's a public hearing by a taxing body that I'm going to have to attend and I'm going to have input. But at the same time, if it's not required, don't require them to do it. I mean, that's, you know, and don't make a suggestion. And I don't think people should have to hire an attorney for everything that they do, you know. And that's enough said on this. You know, I understand what you're saying.
One thing we have done, and when we modified the process, when Mike was working more on the applications, we've taken on ourselves notifications. We do it via email. We reduce the cost to the applicant. It's instantaneous through email, through notification. It's electronic. So we ourselves actually do the notices now. And again, it's time and money saved to the applicants.
Thank you.
Any other questions by committee?
I don't want to belabor this case. I just want to get a little bit of information. Quick one on these EchoCat checks. Does that include checks for wildlife habitat and plant life species, or both and all? Okay. And the other one is, maybe Mr. Cordova is the best one to say if he's here. Could you tell me a little something about this conservation stewardship program? What does it do?
Would you like to come down to the podium there? State your name and address, please.
Rick Cordova, 10524 West Stumple Road, Frankfurt, Illinois.
What's the question again?
Just, could you describe the stewardship program?
A stewardship program, it's a state program. It's been in effect for 30 years. And it basically takes the property that you put into the program and it keeps it undeveloped and it keeps it in its natural state. It protects wildlife and plant species, soil, water. And so, it try to keep it in its natural form.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Thank you. Anybody objecting to this change? We have a motion to approve. Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, 6176M, that amendment are to make it A1. Emmett?
Their agendas are posted.
All right, this is a map amendment from R2A to A1. This particular parcel is in Creek Township, approximately 11 acres. The parcel was part of Jacobs subdivision. It was another phase. The Jacobs subdivision is no longer going through. And the property was put up for sale.
The whole point was the website was down.
The applicant bought the property, it bought her property, her property is located to the east. So she bought the property, she just wants to hand it to her property and use it for agricultural purposes. Currently it's zoned for residential. There's nothing on the land except for, trees, shrubs, things like that. So she just wants to use it for her property and continue using it as agricultural, and there's really nothing more to it than that.
Any questions by committee?
I noticed a lot of it seems to hinge on whether she gets this easement from her neighbor. Is that going to be problematic for her? Does it look like it's going to be a done deal?
She doesn't need an easement, she's abutting the property, so she can access it right from her current property.
I thought she needed an easement to get access to it from some thoroughfares, for farm equipment or something like that. She doesn't need that?
That's a different case.
Oh, okay.
Second. Motion and second. Anybody objecting to this change? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case, 6185M, map amendment from R3 to A1. Emmett?
Alrighty, again, this is a map amendment, residential to agricultural. Let me just scroll down here. This is in Creek Township, approximately 60 acres. This is a parcel that was part of the Richland subdivision, phase 2. It's not going through, just never came to fruition. So currently the property is agriculture, open, unimproved. The applicant is looking to use the land for agricultural purposes and can't do that right now, being residentially zoned. So they're looking to rezone it to A1, the map amendment, and farm the land.
Any questions by committee?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Anybody objecting to this change? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Other business, local amendment 2012 International Property Maintenance Code. Mike.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Weigel, members of the committee. This local amendment will be to the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code. When the Will County Board adopted the new building ordinance in May, that included the adoption of the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code. A section within that code establishes the maximum vegetation height for one's property. It allows for the local jurisdiction that adopted the code to establish what that maximum height is. Since at least 2007, Will County has enforced a 10-inch maximum height. That 10 inches does not apply to cultivated gardens or other areas intended to support vegetation higher than 10 inches. This is really for lawns. We've enforced 10 inches since 2007. There's really been no issues in the past. We need to approve this local amendment so we can insert the 10-inch maximum height into that ordinance. Public hearing was conducted at the Planning and Zoning Commission July 1st. There was no public in attendance and there was no comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Any comments by committee? Anybody objecting to this change? Could we have a motion to approve? Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next item, nonconformities. Mr. Izzo brought this up several months ago, and he sent me an email the other day, said he'd like to withdraw this from our agenda and not consider that anymore in the future. Apparently this problem is gone away, so we don't need to take any action on that. Next item is the school site contribution ordinance. David?
Yes. This is an annual requirement of the school site contribution ordinance where the board approves the market value of approved acre within each school district. So there's a spreadsheet that is attached that shows the valuations that are currently on file from each district. And again, this is the annual approval.
Questions?
Yeah, I think I asked this last year. Why are some not responding?
Yeah, I can't specifically state why they don't respond. I know we do request it, we do follow-ups, and if they don't submit, the spreadsheet reflects it, and as well as the current dates of the appraisals. So we rely upon the districts to keep us current.
Yeah, and we have no guideline for them having something that's current, that means current, like 04.
Under the current ordinance, this is what is required. Now, I would acknowledge that all contribution ordinances need to be addressed to bring them up to date. I mean, they are very old. But honestly, though, with regard to, we've been in a situation kind of double-edged with the lack of development activity over these past several years. This has had a negligible, if any, impact because we haven't had to prepare any valuations because we haven't had the new subdivisions.
Right.
So there's opportunity here in the future to deal with this, but this currently is what we have to deal with right now.
Mike, did you have a comment?
I was just going to add to what David was saying, because last year I handled this and Mr. Frizzlone did have those questions. It's difficult to tell another taxing body to do something, and that's what we're kind of faced with this ordinance. So I would agree with David, the ordinances do need to be amended, brought up to date. One other thing to keep in mind is if we did get a development and that developer did not agree with the valuations that were on record, there is an appeal process that's outlined within the ordinance where the developer could appeal what the valuation is. Right. So there is some relief built in, but long term the ordinances should be brought up to date.
Yeah, we probably should clean up the ordinance since we have time now before the boom hits us again. Now would be the time.
When is that scheduled?
A couple months.
Okay, any other comments? We have a motion to approve. Motion, second by Rice.
Get a discussion question.
Okay.
Can we actually see the ordinance that we're voting on?
Sure.
Yeah,
It's not online, I can't get it online here. I couldn't get it online, so I didn't get a packet, so.
It's on the website. Land use website.
Oh, that went to this.
That's on county board. Land use.
Right here, land use. I mean, the agenda packet's not in here.
No, they're not set up to take ours yet.
But I didn't get a paper one either.
It's on the land use website. You have to go to land use.
Are you referring to the entire ordinance or just what's under consideration
Just
today?
one more consideration.
All right. Mike, did you cut those two back sets?
Yeah.
I got it here.
He's got a copy of it.
Yeah, I got a copy. So what we're voting on is to
Just
revise it.
keep the existing amount, make sure.
This is why I'm asking that question. So if a developer were to come in here and basically they're going to, this is 200 view of nature, I'm familiar, I live over there. Per acre valuation is $85,000. That's not correct. So are we voting to actually maintain that $85,000 an acre? So all we're doing is raising the cost of a developer that would come in for his contribution to the school district, correct?
We would use that valuation if there was a platted subdivision that was to come into our office to determine the cash in lieu amount if they were not to incorporate a school site into their subdivision.
Well, in essence, what we're doing though is we're making it more difficult to actually build, because what's going to happen if they're actually coming in here, a developer, they're going to say, okay, I have to pay my contribution to the school district based upon $85,000 an acre, and that's not correct.
That's what they would be advised, but they could also appeal it, as Mike advised. There's an appeal
But
process.
again, we're going through a whole process here. Why don't we just fix it? So, all right, Mike, go ahead.
I would agree, and that's the issue with this ordinance, is you're being asked to review and approve what the school district assesses per acre. The school district is a separate taxing body. They can
Right.
assess the property and use whatever figures they want to. It does not, the school district does not need this board's approval to do that. This is just simply because of an old outdated ordinance where every year you have to vote on something that really you have no say over.
So are we fixing that now? Why
At this
don't we-
current time, we're not fixing it,
Why
no.
don't we just fix the problem instead of
We can.
perpetuating it?
We can.
So how do we fix it?
How do we fix it? My recommendation would be to review all three site contribution ordinances, revise them, bring them up to date. Part of that would be my recommendation to have a private consultant that has expertise in this area assist in that manner. But we then need to have consulting services budgeted for that project.
Well, can I amend the motion to table this?
Well, we could use this in the process.
But it's not right though. It's not.
Legally, how this was set up,
They don't-
we were set up to put costs on the school district to come up with the appraisal instead of us hiring consultants and coming up with values. And the reason we did that is they wanted to get the funds. You can take the attitude, give me a new appraisal, and if you don't, your school site ordinance is gonna be zero. Most of them are not gonna give you an appraisal because nobody has any building going on. It'll all be zero. Schools won't get any money if somebody comes in with a 500 home subdivision. You can't deal with it then, but you can deal with the next subdivision. You guys have to make a determination as policy. Do we want to expend the costs? Do we want to eliminate it and not have it because there's no building? Because your original design by the county board when they passed this was, we're gonna put the burden on the school districts. And the school districts, most of them undertook the burden, that's why they have an actual appraiser do this work for them. The reasons they haven't since is because even though the market's changed, there's no building, and most school districts are tight for money just like the county is. And the school districts are not gonna spend $8,000 to an appraiser to come up with these values for them when they're not gonna get a dollar back because there's no building going on in their district.
Okay. The question is this. Basically, if a developer were to come in and they would annex into a village.
The village controls this means nothing.
Correct, okay. That's it.
But the village would use these same appraisal amounts because the statutes are set up the same way for them.
And what had happened is out east, is that basically the impact fees got so high that basically it added a $30,000 cost on the building a home, which killed the market, okay? Now, this only pertains to the unincorporated areas.
Ours does, correct.
Okay, but what we're saying though is we're putting validation to this number by passing this ordinance.
Well, you're approving it based on the most recent appraisal, which is what your ordinance requires. If you want to say, we're not going to have any this year, we're going to put a zero value on everything because we're not going to adopt. The way your original ordinance read was you had to re-adopt it every year. If you do not re-adopt it, every number on here is zero. You can do that. That's a policy decision. You guys vote, you decide. That's what you're stuck with.
But we can change the ordinance at any time, correct?
You can modify the ordinance at any time, any way you want to, as long as you get a majority vote and the executive signs it.
But, okay.
But this was brought to you because your ordinance that's in existence requires it to be brought to you every year.
My problem with voting for this is these are fictitious numbers. So basically what we're doing is we're validating this.
They're not fictitious. Under your ordinance, they are what you are supposed to base it on. The ordinance as it was originally passed, and Bob, you weren't on the thing, the ordinance could have easily been written, we need an updated appraisal every 3 years. We need an updated appraisal every year at zero. It was not in the ordinance. These are not fictitious numbers. They may not be accurate numbers at this time, but under your ordinance, these are the figures your ordinance wants you to review.
Because the dates, I mean, 04, 03, I mean, 97, you know, I mean, 04, 03, I mean, you were in the full run of the economy. I mean, it was going strong. So basically, these numbers are very high to me. I mean, and we're trying to be pro-development here and encourage building. And at the same time, if I were to look at this as a developer, I'd say, well, this is out of line. That's right. In the meantime, what we're saying is, okay, the school district can go for you for $85,000 an acre.
But that's why they built in the appeal process, because here's what's happening. Instead of us paying an expert, if a developer wants to develop and make some money, he's going to say, you know, this is really high. I could save some money. I could spend $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 for my own appraiser to come up with a value and appeal it. Based on a more recent appeal, he would win. That's a cost determination for him to determine cost of building. He doesn't have to pay these figures. There is an option. The issue is, do you want to have the value at zero if the schools don't give you a recent one? Do you want to have the county undertake the value, or do you want the builder to undertake the valuation? And right now, the builder's undertaking the valuation unless he accedes to the previous appraisal done by the school districts in years past.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question.
Steve?
I'm trying to follow this, and going with what Bob said. If we change the ordinance to say that we need a current appraisal, would that solve the problem?
You should have to define current as to what number of years. Current, they can consider it as current. If you say you need one within 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, you could do that.
I mean, could you say as of within the last 2 years?
You can say anything you
I mean,
want.
if you did that, would that solve the problem?
They still probably wouldn't do it because they're not going to make any money. There's no building going on, so they don't want to spend the money to go out and get reappraised.
But if they don't get reappraised, they wouldn't get any impact even.
Right.
So it would be on their best interest if someone's gonna build something, that they go out and get a current appraisal, otherwise they'll get zero on it.
I think we should leave it up to the builder to, if he wants to contest it, to contest it.
But just it takes away from building, like Bob said, because they're going by old prices compared to what it is now, when market dropped in some cases 50%. Depends where you live. So you're saying to the developer, forget about it, I don't want to come here. So if you tell the school if they don't do the appraisal, then they ain't gonna get anything. And so it's in your best interest, school districts, to go out and get the appraisal. I mean, I'm just wondering if that would solve the problem.
I don't know. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think that, one, if the developer is advised of the fact that there is an appellate process, I still think it would make certain tracts of land appealing to them. And also, school districts are not unknown for giving tax abatements. I know my own school district, they have done it with some major manufacturing companies, and it's made them stay there and expand and create more jobs because they found those school tax, property tax abatements very appealing. So I don't think because we have maybe inaccurate property appraisals right now, that they still wouldn't avail themselves of the appellate process if they found them to be too high. And of course, if they're artificially low, they're going to love that too. So I don't think this would be putting them off.
Mike? I think based on our ordinance, we need to approve something at the July meeting. So my suggestion is we approve this as it is, and then we pull the ordinance, take a look at the ordinance, and maybe we redefine how that ordinance is for next year's.
Okay. Just as an aside, the county resource management plan or development plan encourages development in the villages of subdivision, not in the county. So we're not trying to get subdivisions in the county. So we're not really expecting to get a lot of this money through the schools, because they would have to go through the village process. We would sooner have them on sewer and water rather than septics or private systems, according to our land resource management plan. Okay, we have a motion, I believe, on the floor to pass this ordinance as it is, and perhaps we can get it cleaned up in the future. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed? All, motion carries. Next item is Will County zoning ordinance text amendment. David?
Yes, at the last committee meeting, I had distributed a spreadsheet that we had prepared that identified topics and issues that staff is recommending be reviewed and possibly addressed within the ordinance revision. And I guess two things here. The first is I want to know if the committee had any particular comment on that spreadsheet, anything we may have missed, or any other ideas that you want us to look into. And then secondly, is that over the next 30 to 45 days, I anticipate that we'll be finalizing that list and hopefully having some red line changes made within the ordinance to then late August, early September, come back to the committee and begin discussion on those topics, and if the changes, the recommended changes, or the options that can be presented to you, we can have some decisions and ultimately a document to take to public hearing.
Any questions by committee?
Thank you for putting this list together. I kind of jokingly refer to it as my list of unintended consequences. And there are two of them on here that I do want to address later on. But David, what I'm wondering about is what do you expect from this committee to do? Do you want us to actually engage in the drafting of language for amendments to the zoning ordinance? Or do you want us to just identify areas where we have concepts that we want incorporated into those ideas and to have you be the crafters of the language?
I think what we're looking for is actually if you have ideas or concepts or issues that you can identify that you might want to have addressed, and I think then we can try and react and maybe give you options potentially to address those in a text amendment format.
Okay, thank you. This dovetails well into the next topic on the agenda, so thank you.
Okay, so you'll go ahead and continue the process
Yes.
on that. Next item is appeal of the zoning case concerning Mr. Riker. I'm just going to take that. David, you want to update us on that?
Well, it's my understanding is that at the Will County Board, they sent the topic back to the committee. And I guess the committee needs to make decisions today as to, A, whether any further consideration of that appeal is going to be given or not, and if not, to remove it from the agenda. And if the committee so desires is to address the topic of the proprietor's dwelling unit within the industrial districts, either A, to decide whether or not they want to move forward now on that, or if they want to incorporate that into the other changes that will be forthcoming over the next 6 months.
Okay, comments by the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a situation that's in District 5, and which is a district that I'm one of the 2 representatives of, and of particular concern to me. This is the situation that I've referred to as a prime example of good intentions that are marred by unintended consequences that have resulted in harmful effects upon people that shouldn't be affected in this way. And in this case specifically, the Reichert, Mr. and Mrs. Reichert, who are here in the gallery today. Prior to October 1st, when there was a comprehensive change in the zoning laws of the county, a proprietor in an industrialized zone could reside there at the site. And the Reicherts were in the process of preparing to have a home there in this area of Plainfield, which is basically characterized by being one very desolate kind of road that's rarely traveled, and it's in a basically forested area that's pretty much characterized by a school bus parking lot and a couple of fishing and gun clubs and some marshland, and it continues out until it comes to its end at Interstate 55. With the possible only exception, and the records can correct me if I'm wrong, their warehouse compound. I think they would probably be the only residents there. And after, I guess, an extensive review by the previous county board, with all good intentions, they decided that there's a problem with having anybody residing in a zone that's considered industrial. This is I-1 now. And they eliminated any special use exceptions to that classification for proprietors, caretakers, and watch people. I think that's a case of being overzealous. I think that the previous board made a mistake. I think it's somewhat actually patronizing that a proprietor doesn't know what he or she is getting into when they buy something in an industrialized zone, and also knows of all the surrounding circumstances and possible threats that there are posed by that, and yet they still choose to construct a residence there. I think it's possible for there to be a minimum degree of risks to a particular type of family unit or couple that lives in such an area if we were to amend this zone with special conditions. I've been advised by Mr. Paddock that a map amendment is probably not the best way to achieve this goal if that's what the majority of the board wants to do. I believe that a majority of the board is probably inclined to do this, but maybe a map amendment isn't the appropriate way to do it. Maybe what we ought to do is to go back, revisit the zoning regulation itself and amend it to bring back an exception to it for residence by a proprietor with special conditions that would minimize the risks that are posed to the inhabitants there, and perhaps even the hazards. And I have a list of things that I think that on the risk sides that we could do. One of which is to make certain that it's occupied only by people who are 18 years of age or older. Because I think what you're talking about when you're talking about risks are risks to people who reside there who are immature discretion. I think you're referring to children and adolescents. Well, in the case of the Reicherts, they are empty nesters. they wouldn't have such occupants of such a residence. So I think that you would have people of mature enough discretion that they could avoid any undue risks. And again, this is something of a splendid isolation in this area of Plainfield Township. There isn't much. I think they'd be the only people living in the area. And it's not characterized by a lot of heavy traffic in there. It's forests, it's a desolate road, and school buses park in there, and that's about it. You could also restrict them from constructing any extra accessories that would be attractive to people of immature discretion, i.e. children. Things like swimming pools and sandboxes and playgrounds or volleyball fields or baseball fields, that kind of thing. You could also prohibit them having decks. I just think that there's a way that we can work around this. I think this is a case where we have a little bit too much government getting in the way of people's lives, and unnecessarily so. So I'm urging this committee to put together an amendment to this zoning regulation that puts back a special use for people who are proprietors that wish to build a residence in such an area.
Any other comments by committee? I agree with your suggestion.
I have a question. Yeah, A was moved forward now, and then B incorporated over the next 6 months. The problem that we have is today, it's real today. Basically, my understanding is they want to move forward and actually place a residence inside this area. But there's some details I think that we have to address. My understanding, they have an architect of record that actually designed this, that's actually performing the inspectional process, that actually will sign off on it when it's completed. And I think that we need a reassurance today that they can actually move forward on that and get that done. Now, technically, I don't know how we do that, but I know in the city of Chicago, basically they have a task force of inspectors. When you call for an inspection, basically just notify them that the project started. If there's an architect of record, basically the inspection process is waived at that point, but there might be random inspections throughout the project. And I'd like to see something like that go forward. And again, I don't want to see government stand in the way of progress here. I mean, let's get this done. It's a very unique situation, and I know it's probably a hard pill to swallow, you know, as far as with our system, but and sometimes we need to actually address our system and make it work for the individuals here. My question, though, is there going to be any problem moving forward if we do select A, the first one here? Let's move forward now.
Well, if one wants to move forward with amending the existing zoning ordinance to establish a special use permit for this purpose, in other words, to reinstate what had existed prior to the most recent comprehensive change of the zoning ordinance, then the step that you could take today is to pass a motion to schedule a public hearing where that proposition would be the subject matter of the public hearing. And then, of course, as you know, once that public hearing is accomplished, then at the next Land Use Committee meeting, you discuss what you heard at the public hearing, and then you could vote on whether you wanted to then recommend to the full board passage of a text amendment to reinstate that special use permit category. So that's something you could do today. Now, with respect to the question of the building activity, let me just be, candid. The situation is this. The petitioner submitted a request for a building permit to construct a commercial building and was issued a permit for that purpose. Then somewhere along the way notified the building division that they wish to integrate within that commercial structure a residential unit. That's what gave rise to the current discussion, because we get zoning approval before we move forward with the issuance of the building permit. Following direction of what we perceive to be the sentiment of the board, we were going to try to let the process move forward in parallel. That is, the building permit process for the residential component. Well, of course, to do that, you need a little cooperation, a little back and forth. And the minimal requirement is you submit plans. Today, as I sit with you right now, there are still no plans that have been submitted for this residential unit. But nevertheless, work has already begun on the residential unit. The complete plumbing has been installed. And not only has the complete plumbing been installed, but it has been buried under several feet of gravel and other obstructions, making it impossible to inspect it to determine its compliance with state and local plumbing codes. We're currently trying to work with the individual to see if we can be creative and do small-scale excavation at strategic points without having to take out the entirety of the gravel that was placed over the plumbing to determine whether it has been installed in a manner in compliance with the codes. Now, of course, that compliance process includes submittal on the front end of a plan of what your plumbing is, which has not been submitted, as I said before you today. So trying to get to your question, Mr. Howard, is we want to work with this individual. We want to do so in a very proactive, cooperative manner. But there are, at some point, certain minimal matters that in order to assure the public's health and safety and minimal compliance with codes, there has to be a minimal degree of cooperation from the applicant to do the fundamental necessity of submitting plans. So we're going to move it along, but we got to have some cooperation.
Mr. Riker, would you like to come up and explain your process here? Mr. Howard has a question about it. State your name and address, please.
Sam Rickard, 14833 South Bartlett, Plainfield, Illinois.
Yeah, Mr. Riker, can you explain to me, or explain to the group here for a matter of record that what your architect that you have employed?
Yeah, Mike Lambert from Plainfield, Illinois is my architect. He's the one that will do whatever plans they need. We had a drawing done of the plumbing, the floor stuff. It's none of the waters, the drain part of it that's in the floor. And we also had my plumber, who's the superintendent of a company in Chicago, came out. He's the one that put it in. And we had it televised and put on a flash drive, and I delivered it to Mr. Saplinski up there to see if that would accommodate what because he told me that's what they do a lot in Chicago. If they go into an old building, they need something, they'll televise everything, they can see everything. So he narrated and televised, and I turned that into Ray also to see if that would subside what they needed to do for the floor drains and things.
Okay, and televising for the sake of everybody here, basically, they go through the drain, waste, and method.
Yeah, he went down every pipe that's either a floor drain or a vent or a toilet or sink. He went down every one so you could see the connections. And then we went as far as all the way through it so you could see at the very, I'm going to say end of 4 feet or so, there's water in the pipe that's outside to show that there was pitch and it had run outside to wherever the septic field would start out there. There was water in the end, so it would show that there was, pitch on everything. And then Mr. Lambert came over. The pipes that are sticking on the ground are not glued in yet. He pulled them all out and measured every, I guess you call it an invert, down to the connection and back up to show that there was pitch all the way down the run, which that's what he told me that would probably be all right with the land use department.
But from this point forward, though, are you going to submit drawings?
I'll do whatever they ask me for, too. I mean, we gave some minimal drawings for the plumbing. If they need whatever else they need, I have
When we were still doing commercial, I was gonna do spray insulation. I have the company who they gave me a bid on it and showed me what they would put in for insulation, which I know it has to go with the building process. I have all that to give in, but if they need an architect drawing, he'll do that right away for it.
Can we actually, from this point forward though, can you submit a drawing to the building department showing that your intention for the rest of the construction on it? I mean, that's
Well, all I have is kind of a,
you have a blueprint to it, or?
well, it's not I'm not gonna call it a real blueprint. I have this here. This is what he drew out when we decided we needed to move, so to speak. So he said, this is what we could do, he would do a regular architectural,
It's a space plan.
yeah, right, whatever they need. It's just, more or less just a floor plan.
It's just a space plan.
Right, right. Oh. You need to see it?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Mike, you had a question?
It's right along the whole thing.
All right, so I want to ask Kurt. For residents, do we give anybody a permit without them submitting plans?
No,
Why are we doing that, not thinking about doing that? I do not
We're
understand.
talking to Ms. Ranker about it right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a space plan. That's not a building.
you know, just to further fill in a little blanks here, when our inspector went out to the site in an effort to determine whether the plumbing had been installed properly and found that it had been buried beneath the gravel, a sketch plan of types was handed to the inspector on site. Generally, that's submitted to our office for review by our plans examiner. But as some cursory review that could be done given the condition of the site was done, it was noticed that there were significant differences between this little sketch plan that was handed to us and what was present, to which our inspector said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, well, we're going to revise that. We're going to revise that. We'll take care of that later." Well, you don't do this, on the come as you go along and make it up as you go along. You submit the plans, they're examined to see if they're in conformance with the ordinances, and then you send out inspectors to see if the work that was done conforms to the plan. So it's just this kind of odd hocracy is creating a very difficult problem, really, for the primary person it's creating difficulty for is the applicant. And if we would just follow the process that's laid out, there wouldn't be these many bumps and grinds. I would just mention also that the permit that was issued for the fundamental commercial building that is now being modified without permit at the present time to have a residential unit, like all permits that are issued for commercial purposes, are for 1 year. The petitioner has been notified that that permit for the basic core building has already lapsed, and he's not been in to renew that.
Can I ask how I was notified?
You're notified when you receive the permit that it's good for 1 year.
Okay, so you're not saying that somebody's notified me recently?
No, we don't make a practice of the thousands of building permits that are issued annually that as you approach the 1 year date of the permit that you're allowed to have it enforced, do we make a telephone call to each permit holder to say you've only got X number of days to complete the work? No, we do not do that.
First of all, I want to avoid a conflation of the zoning issue with the building code compliance issue. Granted, there are some problems here with building compliance code. Well, there's problems with building code compliance here, and that's a separate issue from whether or not there should be permission for a proprietor to have residence in a zoning area. I want to keep those two issues separated. But part of the problem with this building issue is when the lack of clarity, I think, between Sam and the LUD as to what were the gentlemen's agreements that I sensed were being struck between your department, Mr. Paddock, and Mr. Reichert's understanding over the years prior to the implementation of the code. It seems to be, and you can tell me, would you give me a narration, Sam, as to when you had actually formulated your intention to build a residence out there? And when did you communicate that intent to the land use department?
Well, here's my application for, I think it's 2003, when I came into the land use department to change it from A1 to R2, and it went through the process and was denied. And when I went back to land use, they just crossed it off and wrote I1 in there so I could live there and had the initial everything. So that was in 2003.
Did you ever get any impression that there was a change coming in the comprehensive zoning plan, and that despite that, if they had rezoned it, that a residence could not be there, that nevertheless there might be some exceptions, maybe some grandfather clauses that you could avail yourself of, that you benefit from? Did you get any impression of that?
Not until I came in to talk to Ray about actually living in the property.
So you were told that the laws may change, and when it changes, you won't be able to live there?
No, he told me when I came in that the law had changed and you're not going to be able to live there.
But you proceeded with your plans anyway?
I proceeded with trying to do what we're doing now.
Okay, and they made no assurances to you that you would be grandfathered in any way?
No.
I think, to move the process along, and in that spirit of trying to keep the two matters separate, Mr. Chairman, you might want to entertain a motion to send to public hearing the language which David has provided to you, which would reinstate within the Will County Zoning Code the provision for a special use permit for an owner's residence in an industrial zone.
Okay. You want to make that motion? Mr. Reed? Is there a second? We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, if David could now, having taken that action, let David explain to you what the timeline for conducting such a hearing would be.
All right, now keep in mind that this is provided that everything goes smoothly in the process, that there's no external comments to the contrary of what's being recommended for board consideration. Is that I believe, I'll have to double check, but I believe there's time to post a notice for an August 5th commission date with, again, if the timing is good, it's conceivable that it could go to August County Board. Once approved on August 21st, then Mr. Wright would then have to apply, or had to talk about what he could do beforehand, but then you have to go through the zoning process for a special use permit. And again, depending upon the timeline of that, then you're looking anywhere between September and October, again, providing things go smoothly for board consideration. So very, very soonest for board consideration of special use, it's conceivable September, but more likely October.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I'd like just clarification where we're at on as far as the construction process here. What's the agreement that we're going to leave with today?
Agreement about what?
The construction process. I mean, basically we have plumbing partially completed there right now. And in all fairness to the homeowner, what are we actually doing here? I mean, are you expecting him just to stop and cease, or is he going to continue on?
We have indicated to him to arrange a time for us to come out, schedule an inspection, where we'll come out and try to remove, because he has indicated to us that he does not want to incur the expense, perhaps quite understandably, of completely excavating the site now to take out the material that he had placed on top of it. So we've said, schedule an appointment with us, we'll send an inspector out, and we will make every reasonable effort to say, let's scoop out a little bit over here. Now, of course, having the plan in our hand would facilitate making those kinds of decisions. But we'd say, let's scoop out a little bit here, let's scoop out a little bit there, and we'll see if we can, in good conscience, come to a point where we can approve that phase of the project. But the other thing he needs to do is to submit not just the plan as with respect to the plumbing, but the plan for the entirety of the proposed residential unit. Its walls, its electricity, etc. And we're ready to entertain that. but he certainly should not proceed with building further
Yeah,
until
when I
he
went up to
submits.
his office and talked to Ray, told him that I would like to live out there, he says, you know that you're gonna have to get some drawings to us and stuff, and I said, well, whenever I have to do them, I'll do that. I've just been waiting for some direction from you guys to tell me before I go spend money with an architect and throw it away. If it's possible it's gonna happen, I'll have plans to you as quick as I can.
Mhm. And then, once those plans are submitted, they will be, believe me, I will personally move them to the top of the pile. And they will be reviewed and approved as quickly as they possibly can. Now, generally speaking, as I said, you get the zoning in place before you get the building permit. But we're going to try to facilitate things. So we'll move on a parallel track. Assuming we can get the kind of cooperation I've outlined, we will do all those things in the way of inspections, moving toward approval of the final inspections of the residential portion of the building, concurrent with the rest of the commercial building. But I would say this, it really is inappropriate then at that point to issue a final occupancy permit until such time as the zoning matter is ultimately resolved. But hopefully, if we time this all out, that the day that the zoning change becomes effective could be the day that we issued the final occupancy permit.
I'm just confused, how are we building without an architectural plan?
I beg your pardon?
How are we building without an architectural plan? I mean, how physically are you building something?
We're not, I haven't done anything but put the drains in. The building was built by the same company that we applied for the permit for. It's not been changed on the inside other than the floor drains. I keep calling them floor drains, the toilet and the sink drains are in there.
Is that part of the plan?
Mr. Frizzalone, what was submitted was a plan for a commercial building.
Right.
A warehouse, okay? A pole building, okay? And adequate plans were submitted for that and approved. Well, somewhere along subsequent to that, that was when we were notified by the applicant of, you know what? I also want to stick a residential unit inside of this. Well, okay, let's put the zoning issue over here and look at this just through the building lens. You're going to have to amend your existing building permit and submit new plans that talk about the residential component. And if you do that, we can issue you a permit, and assuming you get the zoning in place, everybody's happy. So we are proceeding. I was clear about it. The work that's been done thus far has been done without a permit.
So no more work is happening now?
No, we told them to stop work.
Until the plans come in, and those
Right.
plans are approved, at least. Right?
But I was told, the only thing that's been done out there was we put the heat in the floor. And I was told when I built a commercial building, we would have to have licensed electricians, licensed plumbers, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't have to have a licensed HVAC person to put the heat in the floor. So we did that, that's down on the ground too, that's another issue. All the heat was put down on the floor and covered in when we did the plumbing, so that's.
Again, I asked that question, if there's no plans, how could anybody know?
There were plans for the commercial building.
But
Yes.
does it include this, the heat,
No.
the plumbing, and everything else?
Well, for the commercial building as a commercial use.
But not as it's built now?
Not as it would be modified for a portion of it to be a residential use.
Question by Mr. Reed. Well, no, this has been a messy process, and we have the theory and we have the reality of what's actually happening. Further complicated by the fact that it's part industrial, you're doing the warehouse part, and then it's complicated by now you want to have part of it be a residence. So you've got part of it that probably is in compliance with building codes for a warehouse, but not for a residence. So the residential portion of this, my understanding of this is it will cease. And what has been done, albeit not in compliance with the law, is going to be subjected to an inspection to hopefully bring it into compliance, at least with building codes. And there's going to be some type of quasi-visual inspection. It can't be a total eyeball visual inspection because that physically is impossible without total excavation of that area. But hopefully there will be, with today's modern technology, the possibility of affecting another type of visual inspection. You're talking about televising, or maybe spot strategic excavation, where our land use department can be satisfied that the plumbing is in compliance. Meanwhile, simultaneous with that, we are going to be working on an amendment to the zoning ordinance, which I presume will pass sometime by early fall. Also, while this is all going on, you, I understand, will be submitting a satisfactory building plan, complete with all the schematics and bells and whistles, to the land use department that will meet their specifications, and that you will be doing that promptly. That's my understanding of this whole process.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to proceed, and then we're going to go through all these hearings, and what if the special use ordinance doesn't pass?
Right. We have told the petitioner, as we tell a variety of people in these situations, proceed at your own risk. Meaning, you will be spending money, and we'll tell, you know, yeah, it looks like you're moving forward, but if you don't ultimately get your zoning approval, that's money that you've sunk to no purpose. So that's, I think I'm speaking to your question. That's what would happen is, you know, this is not the way to run a railroad, but, you know, here we are. And he'd be proceeding at his own risk.
We have a consensus.
Steve, let's hear it.
Yeah, I've been following this all along, you know, coming to all these meetings, and one of the things that strikes me is I'm glad we're going for a special use permit, because I feel like if you own property, whether it's industrial or not, you have the right to live there if you want. That's a property right, and that we shouldn't infringe upon the owner of a piece of property with some kind of rule from the government. But taking that aside, when the gentleman, he just said 2003, he made it clear he wanted to live there. So in order to actually build there was a problem with tires. There were 70,000 tires, if I remember right. Is that correct, Mr. Riker? Was it 70,000?
Yes, I even brought up a photograph if you'd like to see it.
No, I'm asking you a question.
Yeah, there was roughly, by the truckloads, there was between 70 and 80,000.
All right, so before he could even do anything, he had to get rid of 70 to 80,000 tires. So it took him a long time, because it's a real expensive process to get rid of these tires. So now he gets rid of them all at a huge expense, and then he's ready to go and build and move in, and they change the law. Well, that's where I got a problem. You know, I think that he should be able to proceed with an exemption to the law right out of the get-go, and we should still go for that change in the ordinance. But I think he should be exempted from the law, because he was in the process since 2003 trying to get this in the right state of for the land for him to move in.
Any other comments?
I've been out there and, I've been out there and toured the property. It's a very beautiful property. I think that Mr. Bible has chosen two words, unintended consequences, very well. This is not a property that you would typically see in what I would call an industrial area, where there's just buildings all over and there's a lot of industrial traffic going in and out, where reasonably, I guess, I could understand about the care of children and things of that nature. In addition, Mr. Reichert also provides a service to the community of antiques on the property. And it's actually very beautiful to walk out there and walk the property. I do agree that I am glad to hear that this will be going back and reconsidered for a special use permit. Regarding Mr. Fissalone, I have taken a look at the proposed site for building the residential and commercial area, and lost in some of the language is that there has been some work provided, and I do believe that after discussion, this is the first I've heard of Mr. Paddock speaking today, that with the drawings should have been presented to the land use committee to review, or department. And it sounds like that's going to be taken care of, but
when Mr. Reichert talks about heated floors and things like, there's been actually no floor poured, but all of the grade, the tubes for the heating and all of that is down. So I appreciate the land use department really taking on this specific situation and saying, hey, we're willing to actually ask Mr. Reichert to dig up a little bit of land here and dig up a little bit of stone here so that we can review it. But this specific property really is out in an area where there's low traffic, and I'm just glad that Mr. Bible has suggested, let's keep the zoning separate from the building. I would ask that this committee really look into this zoning, because I do believe that a special use permit should be acceptable here. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I agree with you, Darren, and we told Mr. Record last time, we wanted to help out. And obviously, we have to follow a process to help out. I just think you need to follow the process too, which is to submit drawings. I mean, I would never build anything off of a space plan or submit a space plan, which you could draw with a ruler and pencil to say this is what I'm building. You have to have plans. And not knowing every little detail of being out and seeing that, or seeing, which, is this a commercial property too, you're selling antiques there?
No, it's kind of my passion. I've collected
So it's like
stuff
a
for
museum.
years. People come by just a few.
All right. But not knowing every little detail, you hear both sides of the story, and I hear we're being asked to try to help. But we also got to follow the rules. Now, we're going to try to help by changing the rules, but we shouldn't be changing the rules as far as getting permits and submitting plans before anything's built, be it heating, plumbing, or whatever, if it's different than the original plans. That's my only concern.
Comment, Reed?
My final comment is that this isn't a problem that land use created. This was a problem that the Will County Board, the prior one, created unintentionally, but we created it, and now we have to fix it.
Okay. There's another item I think we need to discuss is the fees that was brought up at the county board meeting, possible waiver of fees. And we don't normally waive fees, but we could do it on a case-by-case basis. And you would have to bring it forward to the board to ask us to waive the fees for like a special use permit. And but he does have to pay the fees ahead of time and then ask for it after the fees are paid for reimbursement. Is this correct, Kurt?
Yes.
Any comments concerning?
I have a question. Like I said earlier, why isn't this, I mean, he started the process to move in 2003, and in order to move in, he had to mitigate all the tires. And he finally got it all done, he's ready to move in, and we changed the law. Why aren't we going by what he was told in 2003? Why does it change? I mean, I don't know, I know there's no such thing as grandfather rights, but why aren't we exempting him because he started the process in 2003?
Statute doesn't allow you to exempt people if you just choose to exempt people. Everybody's got to follow the statute, unfortunately. If you would have had a building permit pulled when you changed the ordinance, you could have relied on that. He wasn't at that stage yet. That's why it works the way it is.
One other item I'd like to bring up is the packets. We didn't get a packet this time in the mail. The mail was real slow. Does anyone need a packet? We can get it off of our iPads. It's on the land use website.
There were copies of the land use website, but besides that, they're available.
We did. The fact that there was the hiccup with our website. Because they have all converted over to the county board's system.
So does anybody want to continue to get a paper packet? No. Okay, so you don't have to send out packets anymore.
Awesome.
Great. Good. Thank you, Mr. Reichert. We're all done.
Just to be clear, what do you want me to do next? besides getting my architect? You want me to go apply for a building permit?
Ray, do you want to tell?
Mr. Rector, did you cease building on the
We haven't done
this
anything.
right away? Okay, and immediately submit the plans that are in compliance with land use department regulations.
I will get on that this afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any comments by committee? Comments by director? Motion to adjourn? So moved. Motion, second? All in favor, say aye.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, you know.